Hi, it's Laura with Following the Paper Trail, and it's the second day. I guess I should just use one hand. It's the second day of the 12 projects of Christmas art journaling version 2024. Wow, say that fast a few times. Anyway, I have today another binding that I want to show you, and it's kind of loosely based on, for those of you who've been around my stuff for a while, my T-square binding, which was individual little hinges or fins, depending on what you want to call them, that then attached to the spine, and pages could then be attached, and that was for mini albums. Well, I've done something similar to this, but to put in signatures into a journal. And instead of this being done out of cardstock the way I used to do it, it's done out of fabric. One of the things I truly love about art journals and junk journals and doing books that aren't as intended to display photographs, but more just for you to create, which is something, for those of you who've been around since I started doing paper crafting back in 2009, will recall I've been doing kind of mixed media stuff on my mini albums the entire time. But I'm just kind of going back at times and pointing out so that you recall some of those same sort of things, so that you can remember, yeah, I have done that. So for those of you who like, oh, I'm not an artist, I'm not into mixed media, that's not my thing. If you've been doing my projects all these years, guess what? You are. So anyway, one of my little soapbox things. So anyway, one of the things when I first started doing more of the journaling type of books versus the mini albums, and by journaling, I mean books that have more, rather than just pages attached, it has signatures and multiple pages. I have a little bit of a struggle with that personally, because I liked having more of a finite number of pages. So you can still do this with pages if you don't want, or do smaller number of pages in your signatures. But having that many pages to work on sometimes can be daunting. So a signature can be as few as 2 pieces of paper put in there to make 4 pages. You could also put in single pages if you wanted to. You don't have to do, I tend to get, as I do with everything, a little overboard and put way too many pages in my signatures. But one of the things, excuse me, with signatures and working on them when they're pre-bound into a book, is it's harder to work on. So one of the things when I first started doing the journaling is coming up with ways to make it so that the signatures were removable, so that I could work on one signature at a time. So then it's like working on a book. And then, to be honest, each signature can be a different theme or color combinations or whatever you want to do. Now with this method, let me untie one of these. Just like my removable binding, which I think is still up on YouTube, from a couple years ago when I first started doing the journals, I like being able to remove them. You have some way of attaching them, but now I can work, and these aren't all attached together. This is in temporarily, because these are the same. These are the same, for those eagle-eyed people, these are the same signatures that are actually intended for the book that I did yesterday, but I haven't pulled together signatures again for this one. This book had been used as a sample for another binding method, and I took it all apart and took the signatures apart to use the signatures in the other book. And this is a side story that those of you who've been around know, I get onto these side stories that have absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Anyway, so the signatures can be removable, and they can be as simple as, here I've just used baker's twine to tie them on. So let me show you some examples of some other books that have removable signatures in them. So these signatures haven't been worked on, but you can do cool things to the spine when you have removable signatures. Because On the spine of actual vintage books, I don't always like what's on the spine. Or sometimes, like on this one, the spine is faded versus the cover. So, but on this one, what I've done is let's grab this first. On this one, the string is attached, and that's what's going to tie it on to the book. With this one, what I've attached is it's got some cotton ribbon stuff. It's actually got measuring tape stuff. And so then I've hooked on using some of it's Tim Holtz, some of it's some other hardware, but these little rings. And then I have a section here in the middle that's done with stuff from the hardware store. This is pipe fitting, where they attach pipes in your like HVAC and stuff like that. So then I've attached the little loops also onto this little metal part, which is attached to my spine. And then to tighten things up, these little rings then are tied together. Another one, and I've showed these before with the binding that's in these books, but it's the same principle. Here I've used, this can be either black cording or black elastic that I've hooked little tiny hooks and eyes to. And then so the eyes are on these and the hooks are on this center part, both at the top and the bottom. So then this elastic pulls those tight and I hook the hooks. So that's attaching those signatures inside. On this one, again, it's just this red and cream stripe ribbon or this gold rayon ribbon. And up here at the top, I've hooked some rings. For this one has 5, so 3 of them have the rings that these hook onto, and 2 of them have the rayon ribbon hooked onto some Tim Holtz those little things that have loops on each side. So then the ribbon hooks through the rings and the bottom of those and comes down, and I don't want to pull this all off. This does unsnap, but it came unglued, so I had to reglue it. And so then I've pulled things tight and used little safety pins to hold it down. So you can do some really cool stuff on the spines when you're making removable signatures. Now, how this ties into this, my T-square binding, see it's a T, and it is essentially I don't know if I can pull this apart or not, but I've got T-square binding in stuff from before. So see, it was all one piece, and it's folded to form that T shape. Well, the same sort of thing can be done with fabric. So, and these strips of fabric, I'm cutting them all the time to a 2.5 inch strip that you can then fold in half down its length, make it whatever length you need it depending on the book you're using. And I want it to be slightly shorter than by about, half an inch on each end. So an inch shorter than whatever the height of my book is. So then I will cut it down to that length. I'm going to then stitch it from the fold edge, not from the raw edge, stitch from the fold edge a half an inch away from that edge. So let me go ahead and pull this piece out. So this is going to be my binding tube. So in fact, this is just on here temporarily, just with glue sticks. So let me go ahead and pull this off so you can then see it better. Okay, so I've got my 2.5 inch strip folded in half, and I've stitched it at half an inch away from that fold. Now, that stitching I've done on a sewing machine. If you're not comfortable with that, you can hand stitch this. Just mark a half an inch and hand stitch it along that line. Now, I've also then cut out of chipboard, but these could also be done out of wood strips, just something rigid. So I've cut 3/8 inch wide. A quarter's too skinny, a half an inch, you don't need that much. So 3/8 of an inch wide strips of chipboard. And this is the heavier weight chipboard. If you don't have that, use lighter weight stuff and just do 2 to 3 layers and glue them together and sandwich them all up. So you could use cereal boxes. With cereal box chipboard, I'd probably do like 3 layers. And this length is going to be dependent on the length of your book, but I make it just under by about 1/4 of an inch total length, 1/4 of an inch shorter than the height of my book, because I want it to just be just inside the spine. So, and then I've gone ahead and punched in just some small circles at each end. Some of these I probably will put in eyelets if you want to, but it should be plenty strong, and you want to allow at least 1/8 of an inch up at that top edge for where your hole is. Then I've covered this with some washi tape just because it's exposed and I don't necessarily want the brown chipboard. You could paint it, you could ink it, you could do whatever, or you could just leave it raw chipboard. That's entirely up to you. Then let's see, I'll pull this one off because, well, maybe I won't because it's got knots on it. I don't feel like sitting here, you having to sit and watch me take knots out. So this is then going to feed through before you put the strings on. And I'm going to have to pull those knots off. It's not going to want to fit. It's nice and snug. I just pull one off and then get it out. It's nice and snug inside that little sleeve or tube, because I'm calling this tube binding. Tube binding for journals. Okay, come out knot. There we go. All right, so maybe it's not coming out. Let's see if I can pull them out one at a time. There. Okay, there we go. So then this is going to slide into this tube like so. Then I can go ahead and put this back on. Let's get it on the same way. And I'm just looping this on. Now this can be, I'm using baker's twine on this one. This can be any sort of ribbon or whatever that you wanted to use. And if you don't want to have a hole, you can attach it with a brad or you can glue it on. You just want it to be a skookum glue because there's going to be some tension put on it. So I've got that hooked on there. I then kind of twist this slightly within twist the little wood or the little chipboard guy inside to where he's then, so where the hinge or fins are at the midway point, and then I can take my signature, which has been stitched together, and I can glue it in, and then I can stitch this down either on machine by just opening this up, or I can stitch it by hand. Or you can just do it with just glue if you don't want to do the stitching. But stitching on pages and stuff is really popular right now. So doing some stitching on there would be quite appropriate. But that's how easy that is to attach. And then you can go crazy on the spine if you want to. Or you can keep it super simple with just some ties on there. And if this is ribbon, you can also get it so that these aren't all tied at the middle. Maybe 2 of them tie up here, 2 outside ones, 2 tie down here, or they tie in a stagger. You know, you can do just about anything. This could be little strips of fabric, like I said, ribbon, anything that you can then figure out some way to attach it, you know, using hardware. You know, this is just little brads attaching my ribbon through those loops and some little safety pins. You can go kind of crazy, you know, hook and eyes that you get in the sewing department. So it's just super fun, super easy. And then you can pull out all of your, which one did I just untie? I untied this one. Meant to untie the next one, but I untied the third one. So then you can take out your signatures, and then you can do whatever work you want to do inside of them, and you're just working with the signature rather than the whole book. So anyway, fun, easy, removable binding for signatures. If you wanted to do this with pages, you can do, so a page could slip inside of there, or if it's a sleeve page, can slip over the outside of this. But it's got the built-in, because there's a little bit of space, because this is a 1/2 inch and this is a 3/8 inch. There's that little bit of room so that it can move. And what that allows for is that when your signature, which can go all the way down to the stitching, is in there, it gives that breathing room so that it can lay flat. So anyway, have a bunch of fun with this one. It's a really nifty way to make working inside of your journal easier, and I think it looks kind of cool. Whoops. Looks kind of cool too. So I'm doing this with other colors. And then it just hooks right in. I hope that was on screen. And it hooks right in. So anyway, have a good time with this totally tubular. I know, I'm showing my age, sorry. With this tube binding for journals. Thanks a bunch.